You are listening to the Techie Leadership Show with Bogdan and Andrei.
Hello and welcome to the Techie Leadership Show. Today with me I have Bob Burg. He is a sought-after speaker at company leadership and sales conferences, sharing the platform with everyone from today's business leaders and broadcast personalities to even a former US president. Wow, really nice. Bob is the author of a number of books on sales, marketing, and influence, with total sales of well over 1 million copies. His book, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, itself has sold over close to 1 million copies, and it has been translated into 28 languages. Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. He is also an unapologetic animal fanatic and is a past member of the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption, Clinic and Ranch in his own town of Jupiter, Florida. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Andrei. Thank you so much for having me with you.
It's a pleasure. And I cannot wait to get started. But before that, do you want to add anything else about yourself?
Really, I don't know how much there is to add other than that I began in broadcasting. I graduated into sales and then into sales management, which should have been sales leadership, but I was not a very good leader. And so we can discuss that. That was something I needed to really learn.
Okay.
From that point, began teaching others to do what I had been doing successfully based on what I had learned from others. I've had a really fun and fulfilling career as a speaker and an author and so forth.
Well, I cannot wait to hear your stories. So let's get to them. So what's the biggest leadership success story that you've witnessed personally or you know about?
Well, probably the one that I guess impresses me the most is about a person by the name of Bob Chapman. Bob is the chair and CEO of a company called Barry Waymiller. They're a very, very large, a huge manufacturing firm. And one of the things I like about the fact that it's a success story in terms of leadership is that when you think about it, manufacturing is really about commodities, right? When you think of your manufacturing products, okay, that you would think, okay, that's not something where relationships are going to have a big part, and yet, of course, they do. And
of course.
He tells the story in his book, Everybody Matters, and I also got a chance to interview him and a chance to get to know him.
Great.
He tells the story that when he first started, as a leader in business, he pretty much did it the way most other leaders did. He led with the bottom line in terms of financials, and that's kind of how he focused. And of course, he had successes and he had failures, and it was kind of up and down and so forth. Well, one day he is at a wedding, and it's the wedding of the daughter of one of his best friends. And as he's sitting there in the audience, the father of the bride makes a toast to the new husband.
Yes.
And in this toast, he talked about how his daughter is the joy of his and her mother's life, and how they have nurtured that child, they have treasured that child, and as we welcome you into the family as our new son, we want you to know just how much you're marrying a woman who we absolutely treasure, our treasured child. Okay, now Bob heard that and he had an epiphany, and that was this.
What's that?
He said to himself right there, he said, at Barry Waymiller, we have tens of thousands of employees.
Yes.
And each one of those employees is somebody's treasured son or daughter.
Yes.
And it's our responsibility to know that and to treat them that way. And from that point, Barry Waymiller, this big conglomerate, this manufacturing company, became a family. And people felt valued because people were valued. And In the time of the recession back in 2008, the financial meltdown, they made some tough decisions in which they really put the interest of their people first. And that was like, that final thing where they saw, yes, they don't just talk about it. This is who they are. And he's a very, very successful leader, a fantastic human being. And to me, that's just one of the most powerful leadership success stories that I've ever come across.
And Bob, do you have any idea what he did to go from the traditional old sterile leadership model of on the plant and turning it, the company, making it feel more like a family?
There was a major focus on really understanding the needs, the wants and desires, the goals, the values of those on their team. Okay. And they really led their leadership team in terms of teaching how to lead others and how to lead others. And which is, is what great leaders do. They look to develop additional leaders. They had lots of programs for personal development. They really just became a culture of caring. And there's nothing warm and fuzzy about this, by the way. This is great for the bottom line as well, because as an expert on leadership, Andrei, that most people, and we've all heard this, they don't leave their jobs, they leave their leadership, the boss, right? Daniel Pink, in his wonderful book Drive, What Motivates Us, and as he parlayed upon the work of Dr. Edward Deci, and I'm trying to think of Dr. Deci's partner's name, and I'm not thinking of it right now, and I apologize. But they did a very, very famous study showing that really, while money certainly is important to someone having a job, that's obviously a concern. That's not the biggest concern, and it's not the biggest motivator for most people. It's having a sense of acceptance. It's that relationship. They want to feel as though they are part of something bigger than themselves. They want to be able to develop mastery, to not just do a thing, but to know why they're doing this thing and have the opportunity to become expert at this thing. And they want autonomy, which is a sense of control over one's actions and destiny. And so, you take all those together, and what it says is they want to be in relationship in their
that's
job.
True.
Yeah.
And it's in a way they're like, you go to work 8 hours away and a day, 40 hours a week at least. You're marrying in a way the job you're doing.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Yeah. So it better treat you right, and you also have to treat it right, and you have to enjoy what you're doing there. It's not just the money, because from my own experience, you get a bump in salary, you get like a new position. It's great for 2 weeks, maybe a month.
Right.
After the first paycheck, it's like, it's old. I need more. That's always the feeling.
Yeah. It's not that it's not important, but it's just the baseline. It's obviously you're not going to work for free if that's how you make your living, or for something less than you feel you're worth. It's just that's not, as you just said, that's part of it, but it's certainly not the determining factor in terms of why someone works.
Okay. And considering the success story, I'm really, really looking forward to see what is the biggest leadership failure you had unfortunate experience of witnessing. Well,
the biggest business leadership failure, and let me share two of them with you. One was
even better.
One was about me, and that is when I went from high producing salesperson to sales manager. Right? Like so many, I was promoted because I was good at a thing, which doesn't mean it was going to translate into being a leader.
Being good. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. I had no training as a leader. I had no competence as a leader. So I messed up big time. I mean, I look back and see all the mistakes I made, but it wasn't until I began a couple of years later studying leadership by reading books and listening to tape. Back then it was tapes, I'm kind of old, this is a while back, and listening to people and studying leadership that, I look back on my first job as a manager. I'll say manager because I certainly was not a leader.
Yes.
I look back on it and I still cringe. But let me tell you another leadership failure that I remember. And this is when I was about maybe 17 or 18 years old. And I remember a young girl I was dating at the time, and her father was working at a plant. It was they manufactured cameras or something like that. It was, and he, so in other words, back then again, this is back in the 70s. There was a lot more command and control, and he was just a cog. He was just a cog in the big wheel. And he was such a nice guy. And I remember that at one, and I don't remember why it was, but it turned out I met his supervisor somewhere.
Yes.
And the supervisor told me he was a manager at the so-and-so plant. And I went, oh, wow. Do you know Mr. So-and-so? I date his daughter. And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, yes, I believe he works with you then. And then the person looked at me and said, well, he works for me.
Oh my God.
Really? And I thought, why did he say it like that? Now I wasn't, I wasn't thinking in terms of leadership and I'm saying as a 17-year-old or whatever I was, I thought he just, that was like sort of an insult to my girlfriend's father, inadvertently, a guy who I had a lot of respect for. And did that really serve for him to clarify that, no, he didn't work with Mr. his last name, but he worked, he was his boss, right? Or so-and-so worked for him.
For sure it didn't serve.
That's an ego thing, obviously, right? And that's a leadership issue. That's a character issue. So, I see that. And again, I look back on this. Now, I didn't think about it deeply back then. It was more on a just on an intrinsic level. I knew it wasn't right what he said.
Exactly.
But then, of course, once I studied leadership and I look back on it, right, then there was so much wrong with that in terms of leadership. What if instead he had said to me, oh, yes, I've been working with him for, several years now. He's a very, very important member of our team. What a fantastic guy. Make sure to tell him hello. Wow. What a difference. Now, I would have gone back, of course, to my girlfriend's father, and I would have said, hey, I met Mr. So-and-so. You work with him. He spoke so highly of you. And so that would have motivated him to have worked so much harder for that person, And so you think about it, instead I didn't say anything to my girlfriend's father. I let it go. I just, I didn't want him to feel insulted. So, yeah. So I'd say that's a leadership failure.
Yeah, it is. And it's something, it just points out that, and it's good like for each person when they're stepping up and doing their first managerial position, or even if they study leadership or not, to look at them, what they think about leadership, what their opinion is. And then if they decide to study, to analyze, like look back on their notes on how they thought leadership is, and see the chasm between what leadership is and what you think leadership is, especially like from media and movies and what you see in the press. If you have a different perception, it's like a little towards the old style, and it's not what functions really, and it's good. And with that, Bob, I'm really curious, what is your leadership philosophy?
I think the basic leadership philosophy is understanding that great leadership is never about the leader. Great leadership is about those you lead. Great leadership is about the value you bring to those you lead. How you touch the lives of those you lead.
And how can you bring more value? Like, what would be like the most efficient and effective way of doing it from your point of view?
remember that value is always in the eyes of the beholder. I mean, value can be defined as relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. So what is it about this thing that they find to be of such worth or value? And the only way that we can really discover that is to ask and listen. And and it's not just a matter of saying what's of value to you, but it's a way of asking questions in such a way that we begin to learn what it is that they need, that they want, that they desire, what is congruent with their values, what problems are they wanting to solve, how does their life become more fulfilled through, and how can we add to that? And when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully and intelligently, and genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another human being into doing what they will, but as a way of building everyone in the process. Well, now we've really come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment, as opposed to trying to lead through some type of compliance. And, one of my great mentors, her name is Dondi Scumaci, who speaks the world over to companies on leadership and team building and mentorship and so on. She's just brilliant. And I love what she says. When it comes to leadership, Dondi says, compliance will never take you where commitment can go.
That's so profound.
Yeah.
Compliance can never take you where commitment can.
Will go.
And it's so true. And that's why I feel like you have to get to know the people you're working with on a personal level and a professional level, because only by having small conversation and going back, treating them like family, that's how you discover what they value. That's why like what your spouse values, what your children values, what your father, your parents value, because you spent a lot of time having small conversations with them. And you have you have to do the same work for the people in your team, to get to know them and to be like a family while you're at work. And that's a goal that I think most businesses, if not all businesses, should strive for.
Yeah, well, very well said.
Well, thank you very much. And you mentioned like you have a mentor, and that's really interesting, because lots of people that achieve success or are on their path to success, they get mentored. And do you have some advice on how to get a mentor?
Yeah, and I've been lucky because I've had different mentors at different times. It seemed like whenever I really needed a mentor, one seemed to be there. And I think one reason probably is because
I was do that?
Well, I think one thing is that I was always looking for how I could somehow benefit them and add value to them as well. And so they always knew they were more likely to take me seriously. They understood the gratitude that I had for them and so forth. I think a lot of people make a mistake when looking for a mentor in the way they ask. They'll sort of they'll approach someone who they know and admire, but maybe don't really have any kind of real relationship with. And they'll just, the first thing they'll say is, "Hey, would you be my mentor?" And it's sort of, in a sense, it's almost like asking somebody, "Hey, would you share 40 years of your experience with me, even though you don't know me at all?" Right?
Exactly.
It can come across maybe as entitled sounding, or just as though you expect that they owe you, to. So I wouldn't approach it that way. But I would say this: you can approach practically anyone, and if you frame it correctly, the chances are much, much better. For example, saying to someone, I don't know if this is something you would have the time and or even inclination to do, and I certainly would understand if not.
Yes.
I'm wondering if I could maybe ask you one or two very specific questions. Yeah, that's different, because here's what you've done. First of all, you've come at it in a way that's humble. You've come at it in a way that you don't feel entitled. You're letting this person, giving this person an out. You're saying, if it's just, you don't have the time or it's not something you want, totally understand. here's what you're also doing, which is key. You're asking if you can ask a couple of very specific questions. Now, this says to that person that this person's not going to waste my time with some unorganized, just,
yes.
brain type of thing, and but that they have an agenda. And in this case, I mean agenda in a positive way.
Yes.
And so now, of course, research that person, which is easy to do. If someone's worthy of being your mentor, the chances are they probably have a lot written up on them, either written up or on their website. I don't mean worthy, but the chances are someone who you seek out probably these days would have, a lot of information, because you don't want to ask them anything, the answer to which is already, something
that's so true.
that could have been very easily discovered. Okay, because that's a waste of their time, and they'll also take you less seriously that way. So you want to only ask those questions that cannot be discovered through other means. Make sure during that conversation you don't take up too much time, that you make it, short and sweet. You thank them profusely at the end of the conversation, letting them know that you look forward to applying their information and that you'll keep in touch, and let them know how, let them know how things are going. That very day, in fact, I would, as soon as that conversation with that person ends, I would write a handwritten, personalized thank you note, just a short and sweet one. Thank you so much once again for taking time out of your busy schedule. Your advice was absolutely priceless, and I look forward to applying it right away. If it's okay, I'll keep in touch from time to time and let you know how things are progressing. Best regards. Put it in a number 10 envelope, hand write it, hand stamp it, not a meter stamp, hand stamp it, send it out. Now, what I would also do, which is a nice touch, is I would make a small donation. Again, it doesn't have to be anything big, but a small donation to their favorite charitable cause, which again, you can probably write on their website or in an article about them or some story, small, and make it in their name, because they'll be notified that you did that. Now, you're not doing it to kiss up to them or, no, you're doing it just so that they understand how seriously you take this, how much you appreciate them, and that even though you certainly can't provide the kind of value to them as they provided to you, that you want to, right? That you're now, you follow up maybe in a few weeks, let them know how things are going. Maybe you have another question or however. And if a mentor-protege relationship is supposed to develop, it will, but it's a relationship. It happens over time, right? Or it might be just a one-shot that with maybe one or two times you talk to them and that's it. And it might be someone else who ends up, who knows? Do it this way, though, and you increase the odds, you increase the chances of engagement and of developing that relationship. You just need to do it without attachment to a specific result.
Yes.
If they're supposed to be your ongoing mentor, they will be. If not, they won't be. That's okay. Life doesn't begin or end with either. But you can pretty much utilize that same principle in terms of approaching anyone for advice.
Yeah, and the plan is so well thought out. I like it. I like it a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing it.
My pleasure.
And since we're talking like people getting mentorship and growing, what would be your top 3 leadership tips you have for aspiring leaders?
For aspiring leaders,
yes.
I would say to always keep in mind that trust is going to be your most valuable, for lack of a better word, commodity.
Yes, okay. That's true.
And that's really so much about character. And that's how people are going to follow you. Well, because because you have a certain goal that aligns with theirs, let's say, or for whatever reason, there's and I'm just using that as a baseline. Yes. Obviously, if you have a certain leadership goal to accomplish this, and that's not something they're interested in, well, it doesn't matter how high your character, they may respect you, but they're not going to follow. Okay. But I'm assuming first that those are in alignment. Okay. They're going to follow you because of your character. And so that's to have that kind of respect for character, have good character.
Yes. And how do you build good character?
Well, you hope that it's it is already part of you, but if not,
Yes.
then you make that your assignment. Okay. You determine what, and you can ask other people, other leaders, you can read books on leadership and determine what is it about leaders that both are and communicate high character. Okay.
Exactly.
I think another, part of advice is, again, make sure that you have moral authority, not positional authority, right? Positional leadership is about the title, but people don't follow titles. They may begrudgingly have to do certain things because of your title, of course, to not get fired or to, what have you. But they'll do the minimum amount,
just
right?
to cover their ass
completely, right?
Yes.
No, they will follow character. They will follow that person who doesn't make it about themselves, who has. And when we say moral authority, we're talking about just, again, from character, from being that right kind of person. They lead, they follow you because you're that person who deserves their following. So again, it's not based on title. It's based on, well, again, it goes back to character, but this comes to that third part, and that is understand, again, that it's not about you, it's about them.
Exactly.
And I think that when an aspiring leader can keep those in mind, then they're really 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Exactly. And trust, it takes a long time to build, and you can wreck it in one day or in a second.
Absolutely.
So you always have to, don't get mad or anything. Have self-control. I find it's really important to be able to be in self-control.
Well, you got to be in control of yourself. You've got to be able to master your emotions, and you've got to be able to deal in truths. And as a leader, they're depending upon you not just to deal in truths, not just to understand the truths, but to then lead through any uncomfortable situations by keeping your self-control, by staying in charge of yourself first.
Exactly. And how can you help them grow if you cannot keep yourself in self-control and show them the path of how to achieve something like that? That's really, really good. And Bob, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
Best place is just Burg, and that's BURG.com. And pretty much everything's there. So just visit the site and you can check out the books, get a free chapter. You can check out the blog, which is a video blog. And there's lots of things, resources there.
Thank you for just reminding me. I forgot to ask you the question that I love the most. What is the book that had the most profound impact on you?
The book?
Yes.
Well, when it comes to leadership, I would say that if it's not Bob Chapman's Everybody Matters, then it would have to be Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last.
Leaders Eat Last. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Both
So again, Bob, they should go to your website, which is
Burg, BURG.com.
Really easy, really simple, and it's also going to be in the show notes, so people can check it out. I also put some of your books, so they can also check them out. It has been a pleasure having you on the show, Bob. Thank you so much.
The pleasure's mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, bye.
That was today's episode. Tune in daily. Rate, like, subscribe, and share, please. Oh, you can find further info and materials in the show notes on techyleadership.com, including links to the guest book recommendations.